So what's the news for, really? We'll talk about that today on The Hot Zone.
This is The Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hey folks, thanks for watching. Chuck Holton here, and I really appreciate you being a part of the Hot Zone podcast. Today I want to talk a little bit about context. And what I mean by that is this. When you watch the news, you have to understand that the news exists to report the out of the ordinary. It reports for you the things that don't normally happen. So, for example, if there's like a 17-car pileup on the freeway right near your house, well, you drive that freeway all the time. That's obviously not something that happens every day. And so when a 17-car pileup happens, boy, that's news and you want to know about it. You don't really need the news to tell you that there wasn't a 17-car pileup today unless it does happen every day, and today it didn't. So the news exists, like I say, to report the out of the ordinary. And you always have to keep that in mind, because when you talk about hot zones around the planet, these are the places where bad things are happening right now. And the news goes there and does its job of reporting what's out of the ordinary. But you have to remember that it's not always that way. And one of the things I've found reporting from hot zones around the planet is that there's always a lot of ordinary there too. And sometimes it would be helpful to actually report that, because it would give people some context. Here's what I mean. If you've never been to Afghanistan, for example, and you've seen the news coming out of Afghanistan for the last legitimately like 18 years or 19 years or something like that, you would get the impression that Afghanistan is nothing but IEDs and terrorists and ISIS and the Taliban and bad things happening everywhere all the time. But that's not the case. There's women and children in Afghanistan that are going about their daily lives, pushing their baby carriages down the street, going shopping. There's people in Afghanistan that just live and follow their little herds of goats around, just like their fathers and their grandfathers and their great-grandfathers did. And it pays to keep that in mind. Now, one of the things that I want to do as I report from Afghanistan this year is I want to give you some context first as to the history of this war. And fortunately, I've been reporting from Afghanistan for just about the entire length of the war, and I've got miles and miles of footage and packages out the wazoo that I've sent back over the years about what's going on over there in Afghanistan. And I think to understand where we're at today with the war, it might be helpful to go back and take a look back at some of those packages that I put out going all the way back to like 2007, 2008. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to play for you a series of packages from Afghanistan that I put together over the last several years. Now, some of them I'm not on camera. Some of them I was the cameraman, and my good friend, LtCol Oliver North, was the talent, as they say. And I'm very proud to have had the chance to travel with that man so many places around the world over the last more than 10 years. And I'm really sad that I don't get a chance to travel with him anymore, because that guy gets access to places that nobody else, no other journalist gets access. And so you're in for a treat. Take a look.
When an American or an Afghan is seriously wounded in this part of Afghanistan, this is the place they come. And Colonel Trish Danauer is the commanding officer. Colonel, show us around.
Thanks, sir. We've seen the whole gamut, the whole range from traumatic amputations to gunshot victims to vehicle rollovers, concussive injuries, pediatric, local national care, as well as predominantly the Marines and the Afghan National Security Force. This part of Afghanistan has a very undeveloped health sector, so without the care here, there's no trauma center available anywhere in Helmand Province.
A couple days ago, a suicide bomber attempted to attack the Marja District Center. In the process of that firefight, this young officer here with a civil order police stop the suicide bomber.
When they brought in that wounded policeman, he'd lost a lot of blood. What'd you guys do?
He was seriously wounded, and his life was in danger, and we sent a mass email out to all the Marines and soldiers and sailors and airmen on the camp and told them we've got a wounded Afghan police officer here that needs our help. He's got a rare blood type, AB, and everybody answered the call, and they showed up and lined up, everybody with AB blood type, and I spoke to one of the doctors who was in the emergency room, and she told me that blood saved his life.
From the 115th Combat Support Hospital at Camp Dwyer, Afghanistan, I'm Oliver North. The 2 detainees on these helicopters were captured in an opium processing lab. They're being escorted by Afghan narcotics police and will be taken to Kabul for prosecution. Evidence collected at the lab indicates one of them has direct connections to the Taliban. Shutting down the Taliban narco-insurgency is a primary mission for the DEA. It's also a military mission. The 2 detainees who came off that helicopter were captured with the help of Jay Fitzpatrick, the Assistant Regional Director for the DEA in this part of the world. Your guys were out there with the NIU, the Afghan counterparts, and U.S. Marines. What's going to happen to those 2 detainees?
Well, once the detainees are back in Kabul, they will be transported to the Counter-Narcotics Justice Center. That's an Afghan-led facility, and they'll stand trial there before Afghan judges with Afghan attorneys.
One of them had evidence linking him directly back to the Taliban.
Yes, sir. One individual had a Taliban video in his cell phone.
Conviction rate for these guys in these Afghan courts?
Probably about 95% conviction rate, on an average 16 years in prison once convicted.
Well done.
The news out of Afghanistan lately has been anything but good. A Taliban resurgence, troubles with Pakistan, and not enough U.S. troops to go around are major issues that leave serious questions about our ability to win the war there anytime soon. On my recent journey across Afghanistan, however, I spent some time in one northern province where Taliban attacks never happen, and incredible progress is being made. What's even more amazing is that this was once the most dangerous place to live in the entire country, the Panjshir Valley. This valley behind me was the scene of some fierce fighting back in the 1980s between the Soviet Union and the local Mujahideen. Even after 9 offensives, the Soviets were unable to conquer the Panjshir Valley, as evidenced by these tanks that litter it today. But where the Red Army failed with tanks and bullets, an American team is succeeding today by simply lending a helping hand. This unit is called the Panjshir Provisional Reconstruction Team. It's made up of men and women from the Army, Air Force, and State Department, plus specialists in areas from civil affairs to engineering.
Our mission here in Afghanistan is threefold: reconstruction, security, and governance. We're here to help the Afghans kind of help themselves.
In a nutshell, the PRT is here to pretty much win the hearts and minds of the local Afghans, to turn them against the Taliban, to eventually have them bring the Taliban to us versus us going out and looking for them.
I rode along with the team as they drove around the valley checking on various projects. Here, a clinic is being built that will serve locals from miles around. After a quick chat with the contractor,
Can you meet with me on Monday?
we head out to another project.
Currently we're in the Kinj district. This is one of our newest schools that we just finished constructing. What we're going to do is go through the building, make sure there's no cracks, no scratches and everything before they have the grand opening tomorrow.
Even though the school isn't open yet, the local children can't wait to start studying. We hand out a few educational materials and then it's back on the road, this time to a hydroelectric plant that will bring electricity to this part of the valley for the first time in history. Up until now, this has been a grain mill, and watching the flour being made, I realized just how primitive life has been in this valley. Several international aid organizations are offering rewards to any Afghan district that stops growing opium poppies and turns in its weapons. Panjshir is at the front of the line, already having been declared poppy-free. And here in the Annaba district, the number of arms surrendered was truly astounding. Clearly, the Panjshiris have decided it's time to turn their swords into plowshares. And maybe this is one reason the U.S. military has never lost a soldier in this province. Some of the places this provisional reconstruction team goes are pretty hard to get to. We left the road about 5 miles back and got on these horses. Now we're up over 9,000 feet in the foothills of the Hindu Kush. We're going to check on a school that they've been building. We're trying to bring education to some of the farthest reaches of Afghanistan. We finally made it to the village of Aru, where the school was coming along nicely. The team, however, also made an unfortunate discovery. Some farmers have grown a thriving crop of opium poppies. Apparently, they didn't get the memo that Panjshir has gone poppy-free. The team sits down with the village elders and discusses things over a meal of flatbread and goat meat. Later, I spoke with the commander of the Mujahideen security force that always accompanies the team. As it turns out, this man fought the Russians in the 1980s. I wanted to know why then he and his tribesmen were so welcoming when the Americans arrived 2 decades later.
The Russians wanted to occupy our land, and the Americans brought peace, they brought security, and they're here for reconstruction. Back in the days, we didn't have any hope. We didn't know that we were going to be alive tomorrow or not. But right now, we have high hope for our kids, that they go to school and become someone and work for the society.
The Panjshir Valley could someday become a model for an ideal Afghanistan. And while that may take a generation, this PRT team is doing their part to ensure that the children of Panjshir will grow up with a positive view of America, which should make the world a safer place.
Our mission here is really making America safer. We're putting in a lot of schools and clinics, basic services that are needed to help the younger generations grow up in a society that respects their government, respects the rule of law, and eventually, we believe, will not go to extremism.
We were on a brief inspection of this tiny bazaar that's only been open for less than a year when one of the outposts that we were at yesterday was hit. They're under attack right now. An IED apparently detonated beneath one of the Afghan National Police vehicles. They need help, and help's on the way.
We got eyes on the situation, see what's going on. We're also requested air assets to get overhead and see if we can put some sort of indirect fire on them. What's your recommendation? Medevac him?
He's got to go. He's got minimum.
In the aftermath of the explosion, the 2 Afghan local police officers were brought here to the Special Operations Outpost. Here they were treated by medical specialists. One of them, seriously injured by the concussion, is being medically evacuated to a U.S. field hospital, something the Afghan local police can count on as long as there's U.S. forces on the ground. We will back them up. The second important message is this: most of the casualties from the Taliban IEDs aren't Americans, they're Afghans. From Zabul Province, Afghanistan, I'm Oliver North. Here in Zabul Province, coordinated search operations are absolutely essential. There simply aren't enough NATO and Afghan troops to go around. This operation, a search for a nexus target, someone involved with the Taliban, narcotics, and corruption, is being conducted by the Afghan National Army, the Special Investigations Unit of their Narcotics Division, DEA agents, and U.S. Navy SEALs. To get here, we flew on Russian Mi-17 helicopters flown by American pilots. Because the Taliban have previously attacked coalition forces in this valley, everyone's on high alert. This time, with armed helicopters overhead, the enemy chose not to fight. Instead, the special operators were welcomed by the village elders and scores of children. The mission completed, we moved to an extract zone and headed home. In Zabul Province, Afghanistan, I'm Oliver North.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, just putting it together. It really reminds me of how many adventures I've had in Afghanistan over the last, 15, 16 years. And so I hope that it also gives you a better sense of where we're at today when you see my reporting currently that'll be coming out about Afghanistan. And so stay tuned. We're going to have a lot more of that, and that's coming up soon. Thanks for watching The Hot Zone. I appreciate you being a part of it, and we'll be back again tomorrow. We'll see you. I'm Chuck Holton.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.